A lot of habituation sites seem to be brimming with drama all the time, while others, and I suspect most of them, really are a much more low-key affair, with great swaths of time going by when nothing really occurs, and other times when the activity is so subtle that you can come to suspect your own sanity when you find yourself noticing it and making connections and being aware of synchronicities and serendipities. What we're dealing with here is a very curious, yet also an extremely reticent and reluctant species. And these two qualities constantly vie with one another to produce, if the human side of the equation is willing to conduct this, a conversation that unfolds at a glacial pace and entirely at their discretion. It's easy to underappreciate or even dismiss altogether the signs and the signals if you haven't compared notes with other habituators who have learned to read them. Of course, being acutely attuned to such signals can risk tipping into over-attunement or over-interpretation. The best one can do is to try to tell the difference between that pitfall and a genuine engagement with the highly strange brand of communication that takes place. When I first came to understand that Sasquatch have been encountered here in my part of Vermont, my then 2-year-old daughter and I began leaving apples for them. I had found several tree structures that suggested possible visitation. Sometimes the apples would disappear, but we never knew if clever squirrels might not be the culprit. Meanwhile, I explored a wooded ravine 2 miles away, where I found the very same kind of stick and branch manifestations that my local guide has taught me to look out for. And this grouping here is by far the most exciting and impressive. It's been formed into a symmetrical teepee structure. I choose a secluded location to set up my little listening post, and I wedge 3 tomatoes from my garden in between these 2 tree trunks. Something pretty amazing just happened. Really incredible. I've got chills. I've just been sitting in that chair reading for about an hour or so, and I'd sort of figured that the other tomato must be similarly rolled, fallen, and because it's soft and rotting, and fallen out and rolled somewhere. And I just went over here to pee, and I found the 3rd tomato up here. I swear to God. And I would never have seen it if I hadn't come over here to pee. It just slung over this branch. So exciting. About 3 weeks later, another tomato appeared on the trail behind my house. Its skin was entirely unmarred, and though it probably came from my garden 300 feet away, I could not explain it except by connecting it to what had occurred in the ravine. Camping at the site of the previous year's tomato event, I hear hours worth of nearby stick breaks. This is my closest sustained encounter. Who's poking around over there? After midnight, to the snapping sound is added a consistent thumping on the ground. Let's talk. I'm awake. I hear you over there. Say something. I'm going to call you Thumper. One week later, on 3 successive mornings, offerings appear beside my car on the opposite side from that visible from my bedroom window. First, an eggplant from my neighbor's compost heap. Second, a segment of jawbone with teeth still embedded. And finally, a deer skull. with a sprig of greenery tucked into the brain cavity. And then, at least as far as I was able to pick up on, activity subsided for 2 years. So this was left here at the bottom of the driveway way back in middle of July. Back when the tree was green and full and fresh. Let's see, it hasn't been cut with a saw down here. It was much more impressive when it was big and green, but I didn't take a picture of it. I accepted it as though it were a gift and took it back up to the house. And it's dried up and lost a lot of its bulk since then. Inspired by Lisa Shields' good book, Backyard Bigfoot, I undertook during summer and fall an intentional program of object communication at this same spot. I put this quartz rock on top of this other rock. And about 4 days later, one morning, I noticed that this was pretty heavy. I'd say it's 2 pounds or 3 pounds. It's over here. So then next, I put, just last night actually, I put this rock on top. It was just like that. And then this morning I found that this was over here. Not only was that pebble moved aside, but another pebble of the same size was added in. And if it had fallen off, we had a lot of rain last night, so if it had fallen off I would assume it would be there, but this was all the way over there. I think it had to be moved. So this time I'm going to put these 2 little quartz rocks on top of the quartz on top of the gray rock and see what happens. Okay, now it's August 25th and they stayed right up on top through thunderstorms and wind and everything, and now this morning they're off down there. This time I guess I'll go like this and like this and put these on both sides just for the heck of it to make some sort of configuration. I decided to add a couple of gourds to the tableau. So it's October 26th now, and the gourds are missing. Sometime in the spring of this year, and I'm embarrassed to say I didn't mark the date, it was late March or early April. My daughter and I were reading in bed. It was after dark, and we hear from the outside wall 3 knocks like this. I kind of was in denial that it could actually be what I think it was, and she and I joked that it was a ghost or something, and we just kept reading. I didn't rush to the window, just kept reading. But I did start leaving audio recorder outside at that point. So it's April 13th, and my daughter just found this stuffed squirrel up in our apple tree. And neither of us recognize it. It seems dry and not all ratty and old. If it's a potential gift, I guess we should take it and put something else in there. In its place, we're going to put this wonderful little monkey animal who has volunteered. Okay, you got that. Good. Oh, honey, we're happy with this wonderful squirrel.
But we won't have the monkey anymore.
Well.
But if we give him that and he finds it, then he'll give us another thing.
That's right. It'll go on and on, right?
Uh-huh.
Disappointingly, though, the monkey was never taken. In the middle of the night, my recorder, which is placed on the back porch, picks up a faint whistling, followed by this sound. My housemate now sometimes uses a cabin behind my house and has long experienced small oddities. Now she just discovered this clump of dirt. Let's see if I can get a better look at it. Looks for all the world like it was mud tossed there that stuck and then dried out. I mean, how else would a pretty substantial little clump of dirt wind up on the outside of a window? The screen is ripped like that. What the heck? It's about 1.5 inches long and 1/3 of an inch tall. Interestingly, this rupture is at almost exactly the same height as the clump of mud on the other side. Early in the spring, at dusk, she and her dogs were at an isolated pond about 1/3 of a mile from here.
And I heard a sound like a rock being thrown into the water. It had an initial splashing and then a plunging sound. And it really seemed as though it were coming from across the pond, directly across the pond.
Here's a whole bunch of sticks and debris and broken branches, all stuffed in among these 4 trees here. 4 trunks, 1 tree. Whoops. And it's right at this intersection between where you go down to the pond and where you head back to the house. Okay, right down there is where she heard the rock plunging in. The pond is over on the left. But here I find these barkless trees wedged in here, including, most interestingly, this one here that is, 4 feet off the ground. Didn't originate here. Even if it had, how would it have levitated up? And it's wedged tightly in between these two and then pushed over to the right. And, this is weird enough, but the same pair of trunks has 2 others tightly wedged into it. This is not as tight, but it's way up there. And it, too, didn't come from here. It's just stuck in the ground. You can see it's sort of sharp. And just stuck in there. Here's another angle on that. the hanging tree. And then you can see up there, it's pushed around that one, and then behind that one. It was 4 nights ago, I think, and you were just lying in bed. Your bedroom is upstairs.
It was about 10:30 at night. I had just gone to bed, and my bed is parallel to that window, just underneath the window. And just as I was settling down, I heard, and it was a completely still night. There was no breeze, no wind, nothing. Just as I was settling down, I heard a huge sound against the side of the cabin that sounded like it was right outside that window. And it sounded like either a huge hand slapping the building or someone throwing a huge boulder at the building. Immediately after that sound, I heard a very long, elongated scratch. One long scratch that sounded like it was on the side of the building, and then absolutely nothing.
Did it seem like it was coming from up and going down? Or couldn't you tell?
I couldn't tell. I know that the sound alarmed the cat who was sleeping on my legs, and she stood up and was at attention, with her ears back. And the dogs, who were on the first floor, right below us, were sound asleep.
This next little event, I wouldn't have put much stock in at all if it weren't for this strange history of meaning in terms of tomatoes and Sasquatch and me. Okay, September 15th, I just noticed this. This is a former garden. I have no tomatoes here this year, although I did in the past. And just notice this here. A very pristine tomato. No bite marks whatsoever. And it's just been laid here in the front yard. So I'm going to leave this because I don't know what to replace it with. Now it's the next morning, and the tomato is nowhere to be seen. It's just not where I left it. It's not anywhere around. I've looked, and it's just been removed. And you know, animals, dogs, don't tend to go for tomatoes at all, ever. Unless it's a pig or something. And even if they did, they wouldn't, hold it in their mouth carefully so as not to disturb its skin at all, and drop it someplace, and then pick it up and take it away in their mouth. So, I don't know. It was exactly on the anniversary, September 15th, of the tree coming down next to me. About 11 miles from here. So that just might be a stretch to put any import on that connection, but I find that in this enterprise it's good to just note these serendipities, because you never know how they think, or really what they may be capable of. But the fact that it was put there on the 15th and removed before I could see it on the 16th does sort of put more of a fine point on that date. So I just woke up and I looked down, as I do every single morning for 2 years at least, just as a reflex, because these two rocks have been down underneath this bench for all this time, and I just have given up on anything ever happening with them. But now suddenly they're just gone. I don't know what to think. But it was just last night that I finished a draft of this video, and posted it on YouTube. And the tomato part, the possibility of it being left in some way to mark that date, made me think, well, people are going to just figure I've gone around the bend, because how could that be? And as though in response to that, I find that these rocks, these long-standing rocks, are just gone. Okay, this just in. The rock that has been there for so long has now been located. Well, one of the two anyway, the bigger one. And so it's just been these two quartz rocks for a long, long time. Today we find this on the top, which is the one that was on the porch.
I know it wasn't there because this is what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I remember putting that up there often to see what would happen.
Do you know if it was there most recently?
It was not there.
And then last night,
that's the sound I heard. Clunk, clunk, clunk.
like a sitting down, or it could have just been a shuffling of feet?
No, like, boom, there. And then nothing, and then I heard nothing.
So maybe he just sat on the porch for a while.
Yeah, with the dogs inside, ignoring her. Way to go, guys. Come. Right there. Mm-hmm. That's it.
And both dogs were in the house.
They were both in the house. Everybody was in. It was nighttime.
By the way, I really do recommend having at least one small child on hand and making frequent, very visible and audible forays into the forest. Well, this morning is also drizzly and humid and overcast, so it should be similar sound quality. Here's where the microphone is, hanging out that window. So I'm going to do a couple tests to see what the microphone picked up and what might have made that sound, what surface. I'm assuming it wasn't done with an open hand, because it didn't sound like a slap. So I'm going to try if he or she was holding some object to hit with. I can't speculate on that, but if it was just a hand. Here's next to it, in a different part of the wall. Okay, now here is my back porch where the rocks were taken 6 days ago, and this is a little gift I left in their place. So I'll try. Let's see here. Well, I'm really disappointed in the microphone on the one hand, but on the other hand, it tells me that the knock is not likely to have been produced right here, much as you'd think it would be with the focus on this spot, but it's more likely to have been the back of my house here. Even though this is the kitchen, so nobody's right there. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's less risky, but still a way to knock. My daughter and I were asleep up there. She's 6 years old, and she was with me last night. She's not always with me, so you know how they are attracted to children, so that may be important. My housemate was down at her cabin, about 150 feet that way. So nobody at all was in this part of the house last night. I put this glass plate on top of this stack the next day after after this stone was moved here, and it hasn't been taken since. And now I'm adding my new favorite candy bar, Payday. And it's customary in these circumstances to take one bite yourself, to show them that you're sharing with them, and also that there's nothing dangerous about the food gift. The other reason I think it might be a good idea to put it here is that normally what argues against leaving food out is that you can never tell if squirrels or chipmunks or birds or some dog might have come along and taken it. But this is so wobbly that I think it would be tough for any animal to take it without knocking things over. If who I want to take it takes it, she or he can just take it. Now what I thought I would do back here is to hang up this illustration by my friend, the brilliant Jeffrey Caramagna. I had it laminated so it should last. And also the natural choice, good old Patty. Just, to say, I know who you are, and I hope it conveys respect. Well, this is pretty interesting. I just discovered that my antenna is down inside here. I don't know how it would get, it's lodged in here. Nicely pinned under this. I just noticed this as I drove down my driveway, which is only 0.2 of a mile. And the strange part is that in an hour and 20-minute round trip of driving my daughter to school this morning, I didn't notice it at all, even though it's very remarkable. So I would definitely have noticed it, and it wasn't there, so it had to have occurred while I was home between 8:30 and just now, around 2 o'clock. And I've been at my desk the whole time in between. I was just parked up here, working up inside there, not looking out any of the windows. Nobody else was home those 5.5 hours. And it takes a lot to get that down in there. See, already I feel like I'm going to snap it. I don't want to push it any farther.
That day, after the thing happened with your antenna, I was sitting out there on the lawn with the dogs, and I heard sound coming from that direction beyond the A-frame.
No one's staying in here these days. A-frame is about here. And then there's nothing but acres and acres of undeveloped forest behind.
And it sounded like someone hammering, and I didn't think anything of it. And it was a distinctive pattern of sounds. Tap, 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 maybe 3 taps and then 4. And it lasted maybe 35 minutes, on and off. And then when you came home, you said there's absolutely nothing and no one in that direction.